Hello. So I'm making actually a second recording of today's reel because I recorded the first one and it was very long. I want to talk about something that's very personal and something that's very important as well in my journey, which I want to share. And that is how I have come to understand trauma and the impact of trauma responses, and mindfulness, and the connection between all of this. So yesterday, when I was listening to Faye D'Souza's reel, it's a subscribers only reel, and there she's talking about everything that's happening in Gaza and how it is impacting us and it's making us feel this trauma. And there's a term for it in psychology which she shared through her research, which is called vicarious trauma and or vicarious traumatization. And I completely understand that because I have been someone who has actually absorbed a lot of trauma of the people in my life who are close to me, who are my loved ones, who've had an impact on me, and all of that is a trauma that happened to them, but not personally to me, and I absorbed that and felt that pain and that anger and all of the anguish and all the emotions and the emotional charge and trigger that comes through vicarious traumatization. Obviously it makes you extremely sensitive and vulnerable. What it does is, and this is something because I have been experiencing since childhood and I only discovered it in therapy later in my life, was that when you are going through vicarious traumatization, you're absorbing all of this trauma of people around you because you love them so much, you feel their pain, and then it settles in you and it actually becomes emotional triggers for you. So there might be small things that might trigger you, or that might trigger your emotions in a way, like make you feel very emotionally charged in a way that you have actually like no control over, or you cannot actually justify a reason to it. To somebody who's an outsider and who's just looking at, let's say, a person like me from the outside, to them it looks like I do not have emotional stability, or I do not have emotional maturity, or I cannot keep consistency. But the fact is that actually I have, experienced keeping consistency on those things in those spaces where my trauma has materialized into triggers. And these triggers then become my trauma responses. So I've had a I've had a relationship with my partner for many years where we don't have a kind of relationship where we are codependent on each other, but the kind of relationship we have is where we know each other so deeply that we know exactly like what emotional responses or charge will come out when we do certain things or when we say certain things to each other. And that works both ways, good and bad. Like that works in ways where you need the sustenance and it comes from that love, and that also comes like that works in the ways where you need to hear some hard truths about yourself to grow, and that too comes from that love. When we are in those situations where we know that we know each other's trauma and we are triggering that, it subconsciously, because you have created a safe space with this person is safe. I know that, like, no matter how much we will suffer together or fight, we know that, like, no matter how much I am acting from my trauma, this person understands my trauma. So you end up actually giving trauma responses in situations where what you're really consciously trying to do is actually be more mindful and come from a space of being mindful of that trauma. But what you end up doing subconsciously is just triggering that trauma and triggering your trauma response. It is also repeating patterns that you might have seen in your childhood, that you might have seen around you when you were growing up, that you might have the impact of your environment and your surrounding when you were growing up. That comes out in that space, which is your relationship, which is your home, the person in that space that you've built. Something we both came to a realization consciously together and now separately is that you have to work on your trauma response. And like as a person, you have to work on your trauma response. And how do you work on your trauma response? To work on your trauma response, you first need to be very aware of your trauma, where your trauma lies, what it makes you feel, how how does it trigger you, what emotions does it bring in you, like what's the emotional charge that you feel when your trauma is triggered, and then how can you practice mindfulness. You see, our society, the way it is designed and the way we consume content and the way it is thrown at us in like bite-sized pieces, um, I feel like mindfulness is kind of like losing its not its value, but like its meaning, its true meaning. Mindfulness is not like these bite-sized things that we consume. It's actually truly sitting with yourself and being completely, brutally honest with yourself and knowing the impact that you have on others. It's not possible for you to control how someone else will perceive what you're saying to them. It's not in your control to how someone else will perceive what you're bringing to the table, but it is in your control how you're impacting that person. What are you consciously choosing to bring as an impact? It's something that I'm consciously learning a lot this year, and is a journey that I will continue to learn as I grow forward in life, is how can I be more mindful? So small examples are you have a friend with whom you have a certain way of talking, and you know that when I'm going to say this thing, this person is going to react in this way. Or you have your sibling, and you and your sibling have this relationship since childhood. This is how you talk to each other. This is what he says, and this is what she says, and then this is what happens, like, you know, and these are the emotions that are going to come out. And there are repeated scenarios. If you actually look at it, your life is running in a circle. There, your karma, your karmic cycle is running in a circle, and you go through similar situations over and over again, because those situations are trying to show you your emotional responses to those triggers. When you have a similar, like when you have a relationship like that, or when you have patterns like this that you have identified in yourself, that's you acknowledging your trauma and accepting that I have faced trauma. The next step is to then understand your trauma responses. That when I'm in these situations, this is how I behave. So I go back to my partner's example because like he's the person who's had the most impact on me in the many long years now as I have been growing in and becoming a woman. And there are examples there, right? Like he'll say something and it'll like immediately trigger something in me, and I will start thinking in a pattern, which is my trauma response. He's not coming from the space that I feel that he's coming from. He's not trying to do me the harm that I think that maybe he's trying to do. But I become extremely territorial. And when I become territorial, I am acting from my trauma response. I'm not acting from mindfulness. So you need to lay down certain guards that you might have built as responses to the trauma that you have absorbed, whether it is your own lived trauma or it is a vicarious traumatization that has happened to you. You have to bring those walls down. And as you continue to bring those walls down, what you really do is not actually become vulnerable. You're vulnerable when you have all of these walls up, because at that point, nobody can help you. You have all these walls up. I cannot come and help him. He cannot come and help me. My mother cannot help me. I cannot help my mother. When we have all these walls up, it's when we kindly, gently, patiently with ourselves sit with that trauma, accept that traumatization that has happened to us, and bring those walls down. It is then that you have this space to heal, this space where you can create mindfulness, a space where you know that when I do this, this person is going to react in this way, But now we have a space where that person can actually come and tell me that you did this and it hurt me. It is so simple, isn't it? To just come, instead of getting emotionally charged, to go and say, you said something which deeply hurt me. Yet it is the most difficult thing to do, because we are always playing from defense. If you are a survivor, and if you have survived a trauma, or if you have lived or had parents who have survived trauma and they have shared those stories with you, they've been open to you, you are operating from space of survival, and you always have your defenses up. But the same thing that you might say in a very emotionally charged way, or you might come from a very emotionally charged space, that same thing can be said from a very, very gentle and kind space, which that space is mindfulness. I today, after so many years of my relationship with him and after separation several times, and still, I have come to learn that there are certain ways I behave which are not just with him, but actually with all my loved ones. Like, the only person who can come and reflect that to me is perhaps him, because this is a person important to me. This is a person who has an impact on me. This is a person who knows my soul, and I know his soul. So we both have that impact on each other. So we need to learn to create this space of mindfulness amongst each other. And this space of mindfulness is acutely lacking in the world today. Everything that is happening in the world today. We can't go and change the world, right? I think it was Mahatma Gandhi who said that. That I can't change the world, but I can change myself. I'm sorry if I'm quoting the wrong person, but definitely the quote where it says that yesterday I wanted to change the world, today I'm wise, I want to change myself. So that wisdom is on us. That wanting to change ourselves is on us. And we have to do that work. We have to sit and be mindful. One of the tools that actually helps, and my success coach has been sharing this with me, and I have been preposterously failing at actually using that tool. But truly, I intend to start using that tool over the holidays, where I will have more time to sit with myself, is that you can think of situations that might have happened in the past where you have behaved in certain ways, which is your trauma responses, which is coming from your space of when you're emotionally triggered and charged. So you think of all of like certain situations and you sit with yourself, and then when you go into your space of mindfulness, you're like, these are my values, I value this, I don't like when I behave like this, I don't want to respond like this, this is what I want to grow in me. So if this situation happened again in future, you ask yourself, how would I deal with the situation differently? How would I behave differently? How would I acknowledge that situation differently? How would I look at that situation from a different perspective? Like, sometimes I can think of like such very small petty fights that we might have had, which are absolutely like unnecessary, but we have that. And when we have that, I think about, like, now in retrospect, I think about like, why were we even fighting about that? Like, what was I really trying to say? What did I really want to say? What agency was I really trying to execute there? And also, why was I so defensive? Like, why does taking a stand and having your own way and knowing who you are and how you want to shape your life, and still sharing that world with someone, one person, many people, with a family, with a society, with a community, why does it have to be so territorial? Like, we have become so territorial. Our grandparents were not like this. In those days, like, everybody used to live with each other and was quite more accepting, and they too were going with the flow of life, and they too were doing the hard work of life that we are doing today. So we are no exception in terms of like all that we are doing. The only exception we can be is to be more mindful, in a sensitive and empathetic way. It is a very long video. Oh my goodness, I'm going to 15 minutes now. So I'm going to stop. I really hope this helps, and I feel very good having recorded this and feel very confident to share this. Thank you for listening.